good day. We're here with Dr. Doug's All Things Animal Radio Show. My special guest always, and very pleasant and intelligent woman, is Cindy Vickers.
Special guest?
You're very special all the time.
Oh, thank you.
And today our subject is going to start out, we're going to be talking about aggression in dogs and possible training approaches, any other topics related to that. And I have some special guests from iMpower Training, Otto Sturm and Alisha Cole. They're co-founders of the company, and they have an amazing skill set. I've watched them work a lot of crazy dogs, and they've done a great job. So we're going to get started. I just wanted to ask you, first of all, do you have a website we can share with the listeners?
Yeah, the website is www.iMpowerK9LLC.com, but we spell it a little funny. So it's IMPOWER, the letter K and the number 9, LLC.com.
Okay, that was simple. Not. It was good to have you guys here. My first question, I just wanted to get an idea if we have a base and reference. Can you define what we mean by aggression? Is it multiple presentations? I know that we hear about territorial, fear, and all those kind of things, but how do you define it when you approach a case and people say, hey, I think my dog's aggressive or my cat's aggressive? How do you start your thinking?
I would consider a dog that's willing to bite a human or another dog to control resources or to protect itself aggressive.
Okay. So that can hit a lot of different things: frustration, fear, defense, all those kind of things.
It's basically if there's an imminent threat to another individual being a human or a dog or another animal.
So it wouldn't be like a predatory kind of aggression. That's different.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
okay.
Predation and aggression towards humans is totally different. Although there can be prey aggression, social aggression, or territorial aggression, I guess it would depend on where the individual case is reacting from.
So what's the purpose of like a Schitzen training? You're actually creating?
So you're developing aggression.
Right, for specific reasons though, right?
Right. So Schitzen is a sport based on simulated police and military work. Okay. And the biting is for the purpose of detention only. So it's not to maim or severely injure or kill the individual that you're putting the dog on.
Right.
The dog's a force multiplier that puts the assailant under pain compliance and allows the police or the military to do their work without being harmed.
Interesting.
But they should be able to call the dog off immediately. So it's not like the dog is making the decision exactly. So the dog knows that on command that it releases that bite.
And goes back under obedience.
I see. Now, so are dogs actually born aggressive? And when this gets into the breed specificity, we always hear this breed is aggressive, that breed's aggressive. Or is that all created by man?
I believe there's a genetic component.
Okay.
So I'm going to jump in. So I found this study of 4,000 dogs, and really the essence of it was that the way dogs are treated and the way they are trained very much determines if they are aggressive. However, there are breeds that are really bred for the purpose of protection, which therefore makes them more aggressive. And it's Dobermans and Shepherds and dogs that are used for protection. It doesn't necessarily mean that the dog is going to be, and I'm using air quotes, aggressive, as in they're going to attack somebody without provocation.
That kind of sounds like a functional aggression versus like the little yappy dog that wants to rip your foot off.
Yeah, and that's completely different things. But if you're talking about dogs that are born that way, if it would be, if Otto agrees with me on this, I think that it's fair to say, and it's certainly according to this study, really, if that's what they're bred to do, that shows up in their...
or they're predisposed to training that way.
Well, even within the work and within the sports or within practical application, police and military dogs or personal protection dogs, which we train a lot of, you don't want a dog that's a loose cannon or like a loaded revolver with a hair trigger. The dog has to be safe and social. The dog has to be friendly and understand how to interpret a threat and how to control its drive in the presence of a threat. So the aggression is developed in levels. And of course, this type of training can be done inappropriately and produce a bad result. So if you're going to get engaged in this type of sport or training, you don't want to go out to just any yahoo on the street and let them start messing with your dog because something bad could happen. The way we teach a dog to engage in this activity, they're taught how to control their drive and how to interpret a threat and how to respond to the trainer in the presence of a threat. So,
do you transfer that to the owner, and are they able to pick
correct,
it up?
Yeah. And we develop the aggression differently for a sport dog and for an actual working dog that would be on a police department. So there's a phase in the end of the training that with a sport dog we don't necessarily complete. So the equipment that the decoy is wearing is no different than a giant tennis ball. We keep the game fun. The dog is never working out of defensive aggression. So he doesn't believe that his life is in danger. And really in training, even in police dogs, I don't like to show a dog any defensive aggression because I want him to work out of prey aggression and social aggression, and that produces a much safer working dog.
Huh, interesting. So how about going the other way around? Is it much more difficult to take the aggression away than it is to install the aggression?
Yeah, because usually a dog that we're wanting to remove aggression from wasn't built correctly. So the dog doesn't know how to respond to the stimulus or the environment in a healthy way. And that's where it becomes dangerous.
So you're not talking about a dog that you're trained for schutz and saying, okay, now I want to untrain you. You're talking about a dog that for some other reason.
Yeah,
right.
like the client
it's
calls
like apples and oranges.
and says, I have this dog. He wants to kill everyone that comes in my house.
Yeah, my point, I think, was that do you take that kind of training that's it seems like it's much more defined and more regimented or standardized, and do you use those elements and work backwards to try and take aggression away, or is it a totally different game?
Well, can I just say one thing about this? First of all, when you're talking about a dog that's trained for protection or trained for schutzen, training being like the determinate word here, the dog is really highly trained. It has to be highly trained because you're giving a dog permission to bite, and it has to come from you, and it has to be taken from you. So there's a lot of training. You don't just teach the dog to bite. There's lots and lots of training that goes with a dog, as opposed to a dog that is just in the presence of its owner, where their owner does not want them to do this, bites somebody else or even bites other dogs. That is not a trained dog. Obviously, the owner was not able to call that dog off or to stop it or to put it on a downstay. So one dog is highly trained, the other dog is not trained at all. So there's nothing to really work back from.
Right.
Okay, that's really interesting. So we hear a lot of reports in the veterinary office about aggression to other dogs, aggression to their own housemates around food, protection of, I guess, resources. So again, how do you start your process with a client that says, "Hey, I got an aggressive dog," and you got to dissect it out, I guess?
So I usually let the people tell me the story because it lets them feel good to kind of get it out. But I typically don't trust what people tell me. If I'm going to deal with an aggressive dog, I have them sequester the dog in a different room. And when we arrive, we meet the people and we go over what's going to happen. And it's safer for me to go in the room and meet the dog without the owner and get an actual read on what I think's going on from there. Because oftentimes the human is the anchor or the trigger for the dog's behavior in the first place.
I kind of intuitively figured that out in the veterinary clinic because I've had some people, and it's a a lot of people, where the first thing I say if the dog's really skittish or nervous, let me take the dog, and I walk the dog by myself. It's a totally different dog in most all cases. Now, there's some that are just, their threshold is so low to react that it's kind of hard to manage. But that's a tool for us, is to separate the owner from.
But it's not always the case. But just think about what the reasons for aggression might be. If the dog is fearful, and they have an owner that's fearful, they're probably cueing off the owner. It's like, is this scary? Am I in danger, or is somebody in danger? And the owner is giving them that, probably even physical cues that yes, this is a scary situation. So that you would feed the fear. If they are a resource guarder, sometimes the resource that they're guarding is their person. So then you have that. If they are territorially aggressive, maybe not, because they're not in their territory, but it's like defined territory. What do you see?
Well, is that territory? A bowl of food, or is that a region, an area in the house? Or?
Yeah, food. Yeah.
It's all
it could
territory?
be personal space.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting too.
And then there's also some things where dogs have gotten. They are protecting themselves because this would be fear, but they've been hurt by people. A classic one is just dogs getting their nails clipped. That turns into this enormous problem sometimes, and so they see somebody approaching it. To them, that looks like there's a chance that they're going to try to
get hurt.
Restrain them and then hurt them in some way. They're afraid and they're protecting themselves.
I have kind of an interesting story. Years ago, when I was just starting to practice, I was filling in for a veterinarian, and I walk into a room. They have this giant Akita, and I don't know if the audience knows what an Akita is. It's a gorgeous dog. This thing was still the biggest Akita I ever met, probably close to 150 pounds. So I'm naive. I sit down and I start doing a physical exam on the dog, and everything's fine. And I get up and walk around the table so that I might get the shots ready for his annual vaccinations. And the owner just states real blankly that, hey, this dog's a killer. And I thought to myself, what? And I looked at the dog, and the dog must have sensed my fear, because from that point on, he growled. I couldn't get near him. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting,
So something that I often tell people, and that I truly believe, is that every emotion that humans experience vibrates on a frequency like tuning in a radio station. And dogs are sensitive to this. Not only that, but they can smell and detect minute chemical composition differences in our bloodstream. This is why they can do things like detect cancer or hypoglycemia or low blood sugar.
I think in this case he detected urine, because I got so scared I peed in my pants. But
even just the adrenaline, and when you're around a dog that is outwardly aggressive, that's when you have to learn to control your own state and take a deep breath. And you may have to move in micro body movements. Sometimes it'll take me 30 to 45 minutes to even get a leash on an aggressive dog. But then once I'm connected to him by that leash, it's a totally different animal.
So it's kind of like the same principle for those gentle leader collars. I've seen those, and you put them around the muzzle and around the neck, and I've seen big dogs that were just off their rocker, and as soon as they put that on, they went into nice mode, in simple mode.
I don't think there's actual science on this. There might be, but there is something about, generally when you have a leash on and you're moving with the dog, you're walking side by side. So there is no confrontation also that you're having with the dog at that point. So I think it helps them maybe calm themselves, and I think it feels natural, and there's like a partnership that's happening. But many times if you're trying to do something or observe a dog, or there's a child in the house, they come, they square off and make direct eye contact, maybe not even intentionally, but that if you've got a dog that is, and I'm going to say dominant, and I think that we probably need to talk about that word, but that's like game on, because you just told me that you're game on.
That's also why infants can be attacked, is because they blink less rapidly than adults, and to dogs this can seem confrontational.
And they're right there. Often, there's I was called to someone who had a big, I never went back. This is one time, like, I'm done with aggressive dogs, call Otto, done. And this was a really big Doberman, which happens to be a breed I like, and the dog had just, he had something out in the backyard, and the woman tried to get it. He came after her. He had a slipper, and she just, said something to him, came after her, and there was a small child in the house. I'm like, this is not safe. Yeah. That kid who was in the house was when they were standing, they were right about the same height as the dog's eyes, and walking up to the dog, and that dog pinned me up against the wall with its face right. I actually, that's a scar, and that's a scar with its face right up against my jaw, and the woman was terrified, and she couldn't move, and I couldn't move. And I was just trying to say, get your dog. And again,
that's another
there's
thing.
not enough money.
And I tell clients all the time that just because your dog's great with the family, as soon as you have a child come into the house, and children can be kind of erratic and they just grab or go after. I always tell them, make sure your kids understand that dog is your dog and not anybody else's dog until there's a connection or an introduction made, because a lot of kids get injured that way, and adults too.
Kids and dogs, that's another show. But
yeah.
I personally, even though I have had dogs a long time since my children were little, I don't think that everybody should get a dog when they have little kids. It's a very difficult time to have a dog, and there's a lot to talk about with having a dog. And sometimes what happens is that your child does not grow up loving dogs because they don't know how to manage it, and then the dog jumps on them and pushes them and does things that they don't like, and then they handle the dog badly, and it just kind of turns into a big mess. Sometimes I think it's better to wait till they're at least 6 or 7.
So we're going to break here in just a moment. We'll come back soon and visit with our guest, Otto, and Alisha, and talk a little bit. I'm interested in talking about philosophy of training and how much control or physicality is necessary, and when does it go over the line. So we'll be back in just a moment. It's Dr. Doug Pernikoff and our special guest today, and we'll be back in just a few moments.
Look for the bare necessities, the simple bare necessities. Forget about your worries and your strife.
Well, welcome back, everybody. It's Dr. Doug's All Things Animal Radio Show, and my guests are from iMpower Training. And
iMpower K9.
iMpower K9 Training, I'm sorry. And that was Cindy Vickers, who's always correcting me because she has that mother role.
It's my job.
That's true. And we've got Otto and Alisha here, and we were just talking about some of the basic overview of aggression, but my question right before the end of that segment was, can you tell us, what was my question?
I have no idea. Well, here, let me throw this out. A study of 4,000 dogs. The report says that using punishment during training predicts aggression towards people.
That was it, yes.
What do you have to say about that, Otto? By the way, Otto, you can't see him. He's all tatted up, and
that means
got the
tattoos.
T-shirt on, and you're thinking, not messing with him. As simple as that.
Well, he's also got dog images all over his body, so...
So I guess we would consider ourselves a balanced training, balanced trainers.
Oh,
and
this is a big word right now.
In the 80s, I grew up with the Kohler method, and it was the top method back then. And there was nothing nice involved about it. You put a choke chain or a prong collar on the dog, and you said, hey, you're going to do this because I said so. And I might pat you on the head if you do a good enough job. Mm-hmm. That's what there was. He sold all the books. We did AKC obedience, trained all the way to utility and companion dog excellence, and that his training was the tops in those days. Because I was unhappy with the result that it produced, in my earlier years, from about 17 till I say maybe 21, 22, I went completely motivational. I trained a dog to a Schitzen level 1 without ever telling him no or giving him a correction. It took forever and taught me a great deal of patience. And at that point, I was curious if there was a better way. And I kind of started doing some investigation. I was also in a hip-hop heavy metal band, hence the tattoos.
Yes.
So
I remember that stage in your life.
One of our managers introduced me to a program for human success conditioning. And the guy's name is Tony Robbins. And in the beginning, I was pretty resistant to this. I was like, I'm not going to do this, listen to this, and do this. Are you kidding me? Look at me. And he was like, yeah, you are pretty much going to do this. Put the earbuds in and go for a walk and listen to what this guy has to say. So he forced me to do it so many times that it became habit. I was hooked, and I started reading his books. It's something I still do to this day. I've bought multiple programs from Tony Robbins Madden's training, and he's the foremost authority in human success conditioning. But he introduced me to a concept that I was unfamiliar with before, and it's called peak state. And a lot of the conditioning that he has you do with yourself is to put yourself into state, optimum state to be successful, or to be happy, or to do both. And when about that same time Cesar Millan had first came out, and I was in the middle of my motivational only training phase, and I was like, that guy's a hoax. He does something to the dogs when the camera's off. They're not showing you everything. And so I was pretty deep into the Tony Robbins, and I'm flipping through the channel one day, and I hear Cesar say state. So at that point, I'm hooked. So I sit and I watch the entire episode, and I start watching all the episodes. And he's not a dog trainer, doesn't claim to be, says he doesn't train dogs. What he does is teaches you how to manage your relationship with your dog and observe and control its state.
So you appreciate what he does. It's different than what we all understand.
Right. So state would be like an aggressive state, or a hyperactive state, or a calm and submissive state. So now, most balanced trainers have what I would consider to be applied knowledge, meaning that in the last 3 years, we have successfully helped over 3,000 dogs achieve balance through our program. Now, the motivational only side likes to reference studies, but most of their knowledge is only theoretical knowledge. It's a bunch of people sat around in a room and came up with some ideas that sound great on paper, but aren't necessarily factual or proven.
Are those psychologists training?
Some veterinary hospitals, some veterinary behaviorists.
Those darn veterinarians.
Yeah. But
I'm take issue with that, but continue.
So, our approach isn't that there's always one paintbrush to paint every picture, or there's not one tool to fix every problem. And if we cut ourselves off from multiple quadrants of learning, we're coming into a situation handicapped from the beginning.
That makes sense. So you basically you want to keep an open mind, and you want to kind of customize the interpretation of how to train this dog based on who the dog is.
So what I found over the concept of blending the two modalities back together, being able to apply physical correction to a dog and training through motivation, marker training, clickers, and that sort of thing, is what makes it wrong. You had asked, what makes giving a dog a physical correction wrong is when you do it out of anger. When they correct each other, and dogs most certainly do have a pecking order, even though some people will try to tell you dogs aren't pack animals, then out of the same side of their mouth, they'll say they share 99% of their DNA with a wolf still, so you should feed them raw food. So we can't have it both ways. They're either still 99% wolves, or they're not, and we can feed them dry kibble. So
what's your personal opinion?
They do understand pack hierarchy. They do physically correct each other. I've lived for 36 years with not one dog, but multiple groups of dogs, and watched them interact with each other over many, many years. Most of what I do when I address dogs is mimicked off of what they do to each other. So what makes it wrong is when you correct a dog out of anger, when there's emotion behind it.
Uh-huh.
So if you just apply a physical correction and it's a matter of fact, hey, you can't do that, then it does work, and it's not incorrect.
But, there's so much information out there, and I think there is actually a lot of science for using only motivation. And I'm not saying I'm that trainer. I think I'm really a bit more middle of the road, or that's my term for myself. But there is plenty of science. I've been to plenty of seminars with some with some doctors and PhDs who do lots and lots of studies, and that's what they use. And for example, even not talking about dogs, but starting with the dolphins, there is no way to do physical correction.
Yeah.
But it's tedious.
Yeah,
and it's time-consuming.
When I first went motivational, that was my catchphrase. You can't put a pinch collar on a killer whale and teach it to do backflips.
Well, however, I have seen Cesar Millan watch him on a show actually instigate the aggression. So I've seen him do things where I thought, most of the people that sort of are that I know of and see in St. Louis trainers fall far more on the positive reinforcement training, and that's their model.
What would be the intent? Why would he instigate?
Because it's a TV show, and it's got to be good TV.
Oh, so
maybe that's it. So,
also,
but that's the argument. Then here, you see a dog who was, I think he was being food aggressive, and Milan gets down and he gets in his face and he's staring at him and he's posing and and so the dog's just getting more aroused and more aroused and more aroused. So he creates this aggression in the dog, and then he has to do this big gesture to correct it. But people who are watching it who know things are like, that was unbelievably ridiculous, and you would not do that with a dog who's resource guarding.
Right. That's interesting because, that's a mishandling. But I think you're probably right.
Well,
I think it's about the wow effect for the show.
And people love to crucify Caesar, and they don't give him the benefit out of the doubt, and they don't consider what he was going through in his life at that particular period of time. It was close to the end of the Dog Whisperer. He was going through a really messy divorce.
I heard about that.
He tried to kill himself because Daddy had just died. So all those things compounded, plus with the pressure of having to put on a good show for people, hey, you might mess up.
Right.
Okay, so what do you think is the proper time to do a physical correction? And what would that look like?
It may be with a leash. My most utilized piece of equipment is a Mendota slip leash. I'm not opposed to any particular equipment, though. If a dog needs a prong collar or an e-collar, as long as they're used safely and humanely. Again, why limit yourself from any tools that are out there under the sun? We also use a particular brand of e-collar that uses a blunt medical-grade stimulation. If you've ever been to the chiropractor and he puts the TENS unit on your back and it makes your muscles jump, but it doesn't really hurt. So this brand of e-collar is called e-collar Technologies, and they use the same exact medical-grade stimulation that the TENS unit uses.
So what's an example? Like, when would you use it? How would you use it? You're going to give a collar correction, or you're going to use the electronic collar to give a correction? When would you do that?
If the dog understands the exercise as is providing direct disobedience to what's required. So we go through the process of training him with food, luring, marking, and once we're sure that he understands what's required and he's basically giving you the finger, there has to be a physical consequence for disobedience.
Let me ask you a question. Do we ever cure aggression, or we just repress it and it's a constant management obligation?
I think with some dogs, it's a constant management obligation.
Okay. So I wanted to bring in one veterinary point or health point, and that's how to manage a dog bite. Just because that happens all the time and people just don't know what to do. Number one, a dog that bites inappropriately or bites at all may constitute a fine from the police. So I think most people, if it's a serious bite or if it's not somebody in the home, they're going to call the police. I think the most important thing is that you validate that there's a current rabies vaccine. You check with the owner and their veterinarian. You may have to isolate for 10 days if it's questionable. And again, notify both vets, the vet, your vet if you have one, and of course the biting dog's vet. And finally, get to the doctor because you have to have your tetanus shot and antibiotics up to date. So that's an important point I just wanted to bring up. And we are just about ready to end that session, and I just wanted to thank you guys. I wish you'll stay on and talk to us about some of the other things we're going to be talking about. So great having you here.
Thank you.
And you want to give us your reference again?
Yeah, it's IMpowerK9LLC.com, or you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ImpowerK9, or on Instagram at ImpowerK9_LLC.
Thank you very, very much. And we'll be back in just a moment. It's Dr. Doug Pernikoff of Dr. Doug's All Things Animal, Cindy Vickers, and Alisha and Otto. We'll be just back in a second. Thank you.
Rest at ease with just the bare necessities of life. Yeah.
Everybody wants to be a cat.
Well, here we are again, folks. We're in segment 3 of Dr. Doug's All Things Animal, and we have just finished an interesting topic that needs more attention regarding aggression and how to manage it in dogs. I wanted to bring up an important subject for this segment. It's springtime. Well, it's been a weird spring, cold and hot, but a lot of people are now getting out, cleaning out the garage, cleaning out the basement, and all of a sudden, a lot of things that wouldn't be exposed to pets are now being exposed to us. So we can just go down the line, but when you're garage cleaning, you might, first of all, you might be cleaning your car of antifreeze. So a lot of people drain the antifreeze. What some people don't understand is that that's an alcohol, and it's sweet, and it's therefore an attractant to the dogs. The problem is that it's extremely toxic to their kidneys, and it's a matter of dose, how much volume they take in, and how big the dog is, of course. But within hours, they can be seriously ill and certainly die. And there's a special test I remember at the emergency clinics that can tell you within so many hours whether you've had exposure or not. Otherwise, you have to kind of wait it out, and you can tell by certain crystals that appear in the urine. But by that time, you got a sick or dying dog, and that's really an issue. So that would be the first thing I'd say. Have you all had experience? You were talking about mulch, Alisha. What was your point there?
So this time of year, everyone is mulching, and what people don't realize is that mulch can be incredibly toxic to the dogs.
Is it the mulch or the chemical? Do they chemically prepare it?
It's what they're chemically doing to the mulch. And I usually say if it's usually the most beautiful mulch is what's the most toxic.
Oh.
So there's I think 3 natural mulch that they're mulch products that really aren't beautiful to our eyes. But if you see that dark chocolate color, the dark red, that's the most toxic to the dogs. It can make them incredibly sick.
Wow, that's interesting. I didn't know that. I know that I've been told that cocoa bean mulch is toxic, but I don't really we were talking about that. I'm not even sure if I would recognize what that is.
Well, it's also Easter tomorrow, so that means there's going to be a lot of candy and a lot of chocolate. And I think I called you about my son's dog a few weeks ago who had eaten that candy bar, and that week 3 people came up to me and told me about their dog eating chocolate. So they don't leave it out. I mean, they get into it. This was really innocent, but they can get very, very, very sick. And one other thing I thought, it's not specifically about a chemical, but I think since once it gets to be spring and you spend a lot more time outside, you might just want to do a really good walk around your yard and just see what's out there. There's rusty things, nails, or there was an old shed in somebody's yard and they tore it down, and so there's pieces of rusty metal around, and just kind of see if there's holes that you didn't know about. So your dog running and then they get their leg caught and break their leg or strain their knee or take out their ACL or something, or just really walk around and see go back in the corners and see what's back there. Just make sure there's nothing, holes or dangerous things.
I think the general rule is you've raised kids. If you've raised kids, you certainly know that you are always safeguarding the kids against things that they could be exposed to in the home. And the same thing goes with the critters. If you are sensible and responsible, you're going to be watching all the time and make sure nothing happens. I think some other categories of toxins, all the chemicals we have in pesticides, fertilizers, all these kind of products. Another big issue is a lot of times people will put out bait for rats and things, and the problem is they may put it into a rat hole or a suspected mouse hole. The problem is those animals sometimes will carry those out and leave them, drop them someplace, or even the rat itself, if it's ingested a bunch of warfarin type. That's what most of these products are. They're high, intense, very toxic degree of warfarin derivative, and they make them more and more effective by making them more and more toxic. So again, that's another volume ingested, time, size of dog or cat kind of relationship, and most of the time you don't know that. So when you get to the veterinarian, if you have any suspicion, it's better to treat it prophylactically than to even wonder, because sometimes it takes days or weeks to really present itself, and then you often find a dog that's passed away and you find that he's got blood in one of his chest or his abdomen, and it was too late to do anything. So have you had that experience? Or
there's a new rat poison that's a neurotoxin that's active for 30 days, and there's no reversal for it.
That sounds scary.
And
I wonder if I can get some of that from my wife. No, maybe not. Okay.
Oh no! Wow, that you went too far. You've gone too far. Now this is a little bit of a stretch, but again, once the weather gets nice, people tend to go out, and if they did not walk their dogs in the winter, they're starting to walk their dogs. So just dogs picking up just god-awful things on the side of the street, or even in terms of safety, when you have a dog that maybe is dog reactive or dog aggressive, that's actually can be a dangerous situation for people and for dogs. So, besides just protecting them from things that they might ingest, I think, this is, obviously I'm very pro-training, but I think we need to talk about how you can safely get your dog trained so you can go on a walk and enjoy it without having your dog drag you around the street, but that you don't have to worry about your dog's going to dart out and try to grab a dog or
I was out this weekend,
start an altercation.
I was doing mushroom hunting, and
for real?
The morels are out, and they're out in such a slight window, but after a good rain and then sunshine, you'll see many different types of fungus or lichen, and thereby a lot of different types of mushrooms. Most of them are toxic. And for instance, I picked up a large group of, they're called giant reds. They're actually a false morel. So they have the head of a morel, and I thought, I think these are not safe, but I had never seen them before. So I collected them anyway, but they have real thick stalk. Well, it turns out they're extremely fatal. Wow. And many of the other mushrooms are. So that's something else dogs are just naturally going to explore.
And you said, I think I'll get these.
Again, I chopped them up and diced them for my wife. So with mushroom toxicity, they say for the most part that a lot of them, although they're toxic, they may not be fatal, but the ones that are pretty active. You can see kidney or liver failure. You can get vomiting and dehydration. And as you were mentioning, Otto, that some of them are psychoactive. So those are the ones we could probably sell in the market. So anyway, these are things I want people to be looking for because it's really dangerous. And what are the treatments? Sometimes if you have any question about any exposure, some things you don't want to encourage vomiting, because if it's a very caustic chemical, has some kind of very high base or high acid content, if you force them to vomit, it's going to be a double whammy on the esophagus and the stomach. So that's not the way you want to go. You need to talk to your veterinarian, and they'll help tell you when vomiting is appropriate. In most cases, you're going to see some kind of sign. And again, it might be GI related. You might see watery eyes, a change in the heartbeat. Some animals get very lethargic and depressed, and some may even exhibit a lot of abdominal pain. In the worst case scenario, you'll see that the white of the eye or around the lips, they'll see that it actually turns yellow because it's affecting the liver, and you get what's called jaundice. Has anyone had any exposure to slug and snail bait? That's a new area of concern.
No.
Okay, good. That produces a chemical called metaldehyde. And after 1 to 2 hours of ingestion, you get a lot of these anxiety, decreased coordination, tremors, and then they can either get hyperthermic. And those in mole and gopher baits that are designed in peanut bait, flavored, it's going to attract the dogs. So again, all I can tell people is that you have to keep your eyes open and always assume that something bad might happen.
And here's just another reason. Just don't let your dog just run around anywhere, unsupervised. I mean, you just can't do it. Even if it's you just don't know what's out there unless you sort of check the area and make sure that it's a safe area and that everyone's okay with it.
Well, I kind of get that. I always am flustered a little bit when people come in with a dog and he's sick for some reason we don't know, And I always say, well, could he have picked up something in the yard? And they said, no, I walk him every day, and he does grab things. And I'm thinking, well, try not to let him. I know it's pretty spontaneous and sometimes hard to do, but, some people just assume the animal is going to act like a human and do the right thing, and that's not always the case either.
No, the dogs will eat every god-awful kind of crap.
Oh, can you say that on the radio?
Well, I did. I just did.
You just
I was going to say worse. I fixed it.
Oh, that was good. I was really proud
Well,
of
and
you,
speaking
actually.
of crap, they will eat goose poop this time of year, as the geese are incredibly active, and remember that goose poop carries Giardia.
Oh,
so
wow.
that's...
Yeah. That's a protozoan parasite that causes a mucousy, bloody diarrhea.
And people can get it?
Absolutely. And there are a lot of things that get any standing pool of water also
Yes.
would be something you want to avoid for the same reasons. Yeah, I think this whole subject is really interesting, and you can go. It's not a problem until it's a problem. So you can get by your entire pet life and do fine. In one episode, you let your guard down, and things really, really go to heck.
This is this is a long, long time ago, but we were on a river, and I don't know how I could have avoided it. It was a dog that I could let off leash. It was a golden retriever, and he was just kind of walking around. And at some point, he was probably 30 feet away from me. I look at him, and he's sitting there, and he is licking his paw, and I thought, what is going on? He has cut an artery. There was glass or something. He's literally cut an artery. Yeah. Of course, we have to, rush to the vet. But again, I would just say for your scan the place. I mean, do a walk of the area that your dog.
But that's a really good point, because they can just get chemicals on and just sit there and lick and expose themselves, and you don't even realize. So we're just about to finish this segment. And again, I want to thank everybody for participating. We'll be back in just a moment with Dr. Doug's All Things Animal, and we'll do a little recap. But anyway, it's great having you all here with me.
Everybody wants to be a cat,
yeah! Welcome back, everybody. Dr. Doug's All Things Animal Radio Show is about to end for this week. I want to thank Cindy Vickers.
It's about to end. So sad.
I know, but we've learned so much today, don't you think?
Yeah.
I want to begin. We talked about aggression and different approaches to managing that with our special guest, Alisha and Otto Sturm from iMpower K9 training sessions.
Guest is a hard word, so it's okay.
Yes, yeah, I'm good. And they've really brought some great insight into the training program. Very happy to have had you here. And then we talked a little bit about how to protect yourselves and your pets from the poisons and the bad things that might come out of spring cleaning or things out in the yard. So again, this is really important to us. We really want people to be cautious and be responsible to your pets, and that's inside and outside of the home. I think it's really critical because one event can really make things bad. Now, if anybody needs any help in training, you can certainly approach Otto. And one more time real quickly.
It's IMpowerK9LLC.com. That's spelled IMPOWER, the letter K and the number 9, LLC.com. Or you can find us on Facebook at Facebook.com/ImpowerK9 or on Instagram at ImpowerK9_LLC.com.
Thank you very much. Thanks for being here, guys. And I want people to know that if they want a really good-looking, very talented trainer, call Cindy at 636-530-1808.
They can't see me just shaking my head, but yes, please call. But
she's got a lot to offer. She's done great work.
Head.
And if you want to contact us, www.clarksonwilsonvet.com. Call us anytime. And for next week, we're hoping to have a special guest. I'm still working on it, so I'm not even going to tell you who he is, but it will have to do with a lot of things animal and trending activities in the animal world. So thanks, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.